We're back with the breaking news in the political world this morning. Former Vice President Dick Cheney has died at age 84. According to his family, Cheney died last night of complications from pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. Cheney served as vice president alongside President George W. Bush. He was defense secretary under George Bush Sr., and he's considered to be one of the most powerful and divisive vice presidents in American history, playing a central role in the Bush administration's war on terror and the 2003 invasion of Iraq. In a statement this morning, his family says Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing. They go on to say, we are grateful beyond measure for Dick Cheney, for all he did for our country, and we are blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by this noble giant of a man. Joining us now by phone is our colleague and host of MSNBC's Deadline White House, Nicolle Wallace. She served as the White House communications director in the Bush administration. Nicolle, thanks for making time for me this morning. You worked directly with Cheney. How are you remembering him this morning? What's top of mind?
Well, first, I have to tell you, I'm on my way to vote. So if you hear any street noise, all the stories we're covering today are sort of colliding in this moment. I was thinking about this call, though, with you, and there's so much about this moment that jumbles up the legacy of someone who I think most of our viewers viewed in pretty black and white, stark terms before the events of January 6th. And what I'm thinking of today is how many people come up to me and say, I never would have thought that Dick Cheney would be the only Republican to join his daughter on the floor of the House to honor the law enforcement officials who protected the Capitol on January 6th. And I think in remembering Dick Cheney today, you just have to come back to how extraordinary the times are, that he was the only Republican who would join his then Congresswoman daughter, Liz, on the floor and to be sort of face-to-face and shaking hands with Democrats who'd spent their careers, and some of them were elected to office in opposition of everything Dick Cheney did and fought for and believed in after the terrorist attacks of September 11th. And it's just another moment to reflect not just on him, but on us and on how much the politics of the moment have changed who we view as allies and what we view the fight to be. Not necessarily right and left, but democracy and something else.
Yeah, Nicolle, given that Cheney threw his support behind former Vice President Harris for the 2024 election, how is he viewed by the right today?
You know, I reached out to some of the folks I worked for when I worked in the White House for George Bush and Dick Cheney. We had an office that worked with Dick Cheney all the time because we managed all the radio interviews that George W. Bush, and this is going to make me sound like I'm 11,000 years old, but talk radio was really important during the Bush presidency, and Cheney was the guy who spent the most time on shows like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and others. And I think it's a lot of what you and I are talking about, that his legacy became another fault line, and his endorsement of Vice President Harris was one of those, jokes that we tell all the time in the gallows humor category of who had it on their bingo cards, that Dick Cheney would endorse, a Democratic candidate in the spirit of democracy, and George W. Bush wouldn't. I mean, it's just the topsy-turvy, upside-down nature of our politics viewed simply through the arc of Dick Cheney's life is a real inflection point. And people that work for him, everybody has a Cheney story. I mean, I remember being in the Oval Office when George W. Bush would practice his comedy speeches, and Cheney, when he laughed the hardest, would laugh almost silently. I mean, he had a sense of humor, but his legacy as vice president is probably something that most of the pro-democracy side of the Democratic coalition still has hard and harsh feelings about. But his endorsement of Kamala Harris, his support for his daughter as she stood alone with only Adam Kinzinger, the only other Republican that was interested in investigating Donald Trump's role in January 6th. And Dick Cheney was probably the most prominent former Republican elected official to stand behind them.
Yeah, and he was so divisive, obviously, as a vice president, really for both parties, given his role in the war on terror and America going into the Middle East during the Bush administrations. But President Bush released this statement this morning praising Cheney as a calm and steady presence in the White House amid great national challenges. And he writes, "I counted on him for his honest, forthright counsel, and he never failed to give his best. He held to his convictions and prioritized the freedom and security of the American people." Nicole, you gave us a little glimpse behind the scenes inside the White House and the dynamics, but I just wonder, what did the public really not see about Dick Cheney?
I think anything they missed while he was vice president, they caught while he was Liz Cheney's father. That for him, nothing trumped family. For him to do that advertisement for her ahead of the election and call it like he saw it was the person we saw behind the scenes, and not to sort of wander or try to wash over. I don't think he would want any of his more polarizing or views that maybe haven't aged as well to be sanitized or obscured by his support for his daughter and her endorsement of Kamala Harris and the intense efforts to investigate Donald Trump's role in the January 6th attack. I mean, that sort of complicated picture that put him at odds with half the country while he was vice president, and then really the other half while he supported his daughter's efforts to get to the bottom of Trump's role on January 6th, is as sort of fair and honest of a portrait of him as you could render.
Nicole Wallace, it's so great to have you here. I know you're multitasking in so many ways this morning as a mom and as a voter here in New York City as you prepare for your show this evening. Great to have you. Thank you so much.